Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrei Shevchenko on behalf of the Mediacentru of Ukraine team. I welcome all the journalists telling the world about our battle for freedom. With us are Natalia Galibarenko, UN ambassador to NATO. Hello, ma'am. Thank you, colleague. I will be talking about Ukraine's relationship with NATO and Ukraine's application for membership. Uh, could you tell us what the first response has been in Brussels? The response in Brussels has been as expected, and it kind of corresponds to what the Secretary General said at the first press conference. It's that the door of the alliance is open, and it's our sovereign right to submit an application, and as soon as we correspond to the criteria, we'll be happily received as a member of the organization. Although, of course, the majority of my colleagues say that more specific application chances would increase greatly after the war ends. So, from translating from diplomatic, we're being told we're your friends, we're your allies, we'll help you, but as far as the formalization of your membership, we have to wait. I mean, I don't want to dramatize the situation because let's be honest, when Ukraine was applying for candidacy, we also had all kinds of forecasts and prognosis, and a lot of skeptics said Ukraine should best forget it. But we did get the candidate status, and so it's just a question of what can you do in order to establish a consensus in NATO about our desire. Our application is no surprise to anyone because the countries knew about our desire to apply. We discussed various options, and so the reason that we chose this option and immediately apply for membership, much like Sweden and Finland had done, this was one of the scripts that was expected. We also know from the news that there's a group of countries that have directly and publicly supported Ukraine's application, or this more aggressive, more assertive stance, more ambitious stance regarding Ukraine's membership. Whom have you been relying on in your work? I agree with you, Andrei. Obviously, that these 9 countries that have declared their support are essentially the core that have supported Ukraine from the start. And even during the war, these countries have said that they're prepared to endorse our aspiration and our accession to NATO. Of course, I was also very pleased by the statement by Minister Jolie's statement, the Foreign Minister of Canada, who publicly supported our application. The more skeptic states are also known. There are no big surprises. The only question is, essentially, the application is also a response to the dynamic processes and to the events unfolding. And I hope that our allies understand this as well. This is a normal practice, changing your attitude, changing your stance when you see circumstances change. Strategically, we're always talking about joining NATO. Now, this is the tactic that has been chosen by the leadership of Ukraine. What might be the next step for us? Can we expect the consideration of Ukraine's issue at the coming summit at Vilnius next year, or is something awaited earlier? If we're talking about specific action plan, of course the ball's in their court, ball's in NATO's court, because after the application was formally submitted, now the member states have to have a preliminary discussion about our application and express their stances. What pleases me in my work is that now the discussion about our future membership has been formalized. So previously these were kind of unofficial discussions, off the grid almost, because officially the question was not raised. Now this discussion will be part of the North Atlantic Council. One of the first discussions will be at the level of ambassadors. The second discussion, I do not rule out that this will be part of the meeting of the ministers of defense. And among such significant steps, we await a foreign ministers meeting of NATO. So we're formalizing the discussion now. When will the defense ministers meeting set to happen? It's October 12th, 13th. First, there will be the Ramstein format meeting. This is a special contact group supporting Ukraine. And then the next day, we expect a defense ministers meeting where we expect Reznikov, our Minister of Defense. What has been the response from our partners and from the NATO leadership to the new nuclear threats on the part of Putin and Russia? I think that our positions here are similar. Like Ukraine, both Ukraine and our allies believe that in spite of the threats, the real risk is not very high. Because, as our friends believe, this isn't just a question of a political decision, it's a question of performing certain practical steps that are also being traced by the partners, and Russia is not performing those steps. Although, let us be clear, Putin has so often acted against the interests of his state that expecting some sort of rational approach is not guaranteed. It's perhaps folly. In our coexistence with the Russians, both we and the allies should be prepared for any option, and we should get ready for it. Then I'll rephrase the question: to what extent is NATO prepared for this horrendous scenario, and do we have a sense of what the steps might be on the part of the alliance if, God forbid, Russia should turn to such steps? As you've probably seen, the Secretary General has already come out with a statement that they call on Russia to review their decision and simply understand the consequences that might hit Russia in case of the use of nuclear weapons. I've also noticed the statement by President Biden, who said that at all level the signal has been put to Russia as to the unacceptability of this behavior. As far as I know, we've had analogous signals from India, from the leaders of India and China. So effectively, in this question, we see a complete, very firm stance of the different states that Russia must not in any way resort to such steps because it will destroy the world order. What might NATO realistically do, or how will the alliance make decisions? The stance of the alliance is that as soon as a strike is perpetrated or some sort of involvement into any of the member states, Article 5 comes into effect immediately. Both the Secretary General and the leader of the United States have said that Russia should have no doubts that as soon as there's an attack on any of the member states, all will be involved as part of the Article 5. And as far as the escalating in Ukraine, you know very well the stance of the alliance. Uh, you might disagree with it, or we might disagree with it, but that is what we're dealing with. The alliance is prepared to help in various ways and increase this support. The member states are prepared to offer military support, but they're not going to fight for Ukraine in Ukrainian territory. President Zelensky, on the day when he was signing Ukraine's application for NATO membership, said that effectively we're already in the alliance. Obviously, clearly he meant the progress that took place in our relationship with NATO in the past few months and years. To what extent does this correspond to is this also your sense? To what extent do you share this sense when you talk to your colleagues in Brussels? Allow me, Andrei, I will state my impression. My impression has been more that the president meant that with our armed forces and with our battlefield successes, advances, we have shown that we are meeting the Western standards to such an extent that the NATO might stand to benefit from learning from us. I thought that was the message. That was my impression. And so effectively, if we're talking about the alliance, bringing together the most powerful countries with developed armies, then we are one of those countries, and our army has a lot to teach others. To what extent is this what you're hearing from your colleagues in Brussels? Yeah, I'm even hearing jokes from my colleagues that, after the victory, maybe it's best if for the NATO member and armies to integrate into the Ukrainian armies rather than vice versa. They're saying, Madam Ambassador, do you really think, do you genuinely want to succeed? Perhaps we should apply for integration with your armed forces. Natalia Galibarenko, Ukraine's ambassador to NATO, on the cooperation between Ukraine and the alliance. We thank you for this conversation. Thank you. And I welcome all the journalists to